Yeah. Okay, so thanks for being there today. Today I will do a presentation about I would say short, but it will not be short. So I will try to make it fast, but maybe I will stop before the end. So today I will explain a bit machine learning the machine learning techniques we use in general in the team, and especially in the variability part of the team. So I will split my presentation in three parts. First of all, I will talk about supervised learning. Then we'll do a little break and talk about the video we have to prepare to introduce diverse, and especially to put on the YouTube channel. After that, I will present some supervised learning techniques. And finally, if we have some time left, we'll mention reinforcement learning, but I don't know a lot about that. As usual, feel free to stop me, especially if it's not clear or something like that. It will be an high-level presentation. I will try to avoid presenting too much math there. It's not the idea. And I will present some algorithm, but it's a non-exhaustive list. And of course, I cannot explain all machine learning in half an hour. If you're interested, I put some example in a GitHub repository. So there are plenty of resources out there, but still you can use it by following the address you see on the screen. I will mostly use scikit-learn and Keras for the neural networks. Okay, so let's start with supervised learning. A typical supervised learning problem is the following. You have a data set of images. On these images, you have numbers. And you want to retrieve the numbers that are present on these images. So on the remainder of this presentation, X will always be the variable we got, and we have to predict Y thanks to X. So we call X the explaining variables, and Y is the variable to predict, or variable of interest in the literature. And supervised learning is really that. It's the fact to use X to be able to predict Y. So as we are good scientists, we validate our model. So we split our data set in two parts. One part is the training. So which type of images will result to certain numbers. And once we have trained our model, we predict the other part of the data set, the test part. We predict the label of these images, and we compare it to the label, to the real label. We want it, of course, we want it to be close to the real label. Okay, but when we say close, what do we mean? So a short example, let's say we want to study Tux happiness. So Tux is the penguin right here. And we want to study some sort of happiness score based on the amount of fish he ate this day, or the amount of ice melted in the North Pole. And to do that, we use two machine learning algorithms. The first one gives 3, which is close to the real happiness. The second one gives a low score very far. So how do we measure this that a machine learning algorithm is accurate? We use a loss function, and depending on the parameter of the algorithm, the loss function will be high or low. It's a bit like a chain of mountain. I like this image. And when you have to make an algorithm converge, it's a bit like climbing a mountain, except you have vertigo and you want to find the lowest spot of the mountain. And it's a bit of a paradox, but sometimes you have to go up to finally find the minimal spots. So I've given you a few examples of function, and also June has a nice PDF about those functions, so you can ask for this PDF. So in supervised learning, and depending on the input data, we use a different algorithm. So if we want to predict a y, so a variable that is qualitative, for example, a color or a scale with which cannot be separated, we call it classification. And if the y is quantitative, if it's a sensor value or a number of occurrences, like the number of haircuts you've got since the beginning of the year, it's a recursion. Most of the algorithm handles classification and regression, but sometimes you have to know your data. So I'll start to present a list of algorithm. It's a list, right? No, it's not super fun, but I think it's useful to know some algorithm. So I want to show you some mainstream algorithm. It's not fancy stuff. You can use it when you have benchmark, so, for example. And okay, so let's study that. We start with linear regression. It's a simple algorithm you can use. So to understand it, just look at the picture. You have your explaining variable, your variable to predict, and the explaining variable, and you have a big scatter plot. In fact, just doing a linear regression is just saying, okay, I want to estimate the scatter plot with a line. That's the red line. And when I had a new value, that's the green point, I will project my point on the line. So for you, it's a simple algorithm to apply on quantitative data, but it's not designed for complex data sets. And it just computes linear relationships. So if you have to deal with polynomial sort of thing, you can add the polynomial variable, but it will not. Maybe you have to use another more complex algorithm. Another very useful algorithm is a decision tree. This time we have our data, and we have x1 and x2. That's two variables to explain our data. And we want the algorithm is there to split the data set into small parts, hopefully having the same type of performance of variable you want to predict. And in fact, this algorithm is pretty simple, but it's useful to extract some rules. I mean, sometimes even for experts of one field, it's really hard to find to say, okay, we want to split our dataset in two parts, but the threshold is 3.5, and we split that here. So it could be really useful. And to do a prediction, once we isolate our subset of data, we just put the average of the subset. So it's really simple, but if you understood that, you understood a lot of algorithm, because a lot of algorithms use that as a weak learner. And for example, random forest, it's a combination of decision trees. Each decision trees of the forest predict a value based on a sample of feature and a sample of lines. And then they vote, and we just put the average value, which is really good in statistics because average values have good properties. So it's bagging, bootstrap, aggregating. And I think random forest is the best compromise between simplicity and accuracy. So use it. I think as a software engineer, it's probably the best compromise you can find. But if you're not happy enough with random forest, you can use boosting trees. So instead of doing just the same trees, the same tree, we want to use the previous result to upgrade our next tree. And that's boosting trees. So there are there are many type of boosting. And one of them is XGBoost. And this algorithm is known to win a lot of competition on Kaggle. It's a website online where data scientists try to get the best accuracy on some problem. So it's very powerful, but you have many hyperparameters to find and to optimize, because you have to optimize the trees you have in the algorithm, but you have also the gradient boosting part. And finally, but I think most of the time it's overkill to use that. You can use neural networks. It's really not designed to simple dataset. If you have less than, let's say, 10,000 lines, don't use a neural network. Or if you want to have fun, go, but in a paper, don't do that. And it requires a lot of resources. And another drawback is that it's a black box algorithm. It means that you cannot have specific feedback and get your weight in the middle of the convergence. I just put some Google architecture. It means that each square is a layer like that. So it's not the biggest of Google, but it's still a big neural network, and it's an algorithm that often give best accuracies, but it's also complicated to implement. And just just a slide to say, okay, there is other type of algorithm you can use. You can, of course, there are plenty of regression methods. There are support vector machine. I don't like this algorithm, but I can not mention it. And of course, you have a special algorithm dedicated to time series predictions, like recurrent neural network, RNN, or ARMA, that's dedicated things to time series. Second part of the coffee. So it's about unsupervised learning. So why is it different and how is it different from supervised learning? Well, supervised learning, it's pretty cool, right? You have the variable you want to predict in your data sets, but sometimes machine learning is a bit like hell, and you don't know what to do with your data. You know you want to group them, but you don't have the variable to predict that. And when you are in this situation, you use unsupervised learning. The first method I want to, the first algorithm I want to present is K-means. You might have heard of it. It's a simple clustering. So I have this graph, and I have these groups, this cluster of points that we already have classified in our brain. And I want to put a label on each point and say, okay, all these points have the label 1, all these points have the label 2, all these points have the label 3. So in the first step, I will choose the center. So there are several methods to choose how the center are in the graph. And then I will aggregate the point near the center and say, okay, it's a part of this group. And when all the points are classified, we recompute the centers and we loop until the cluster doesn't change or we reach the maximal number of steps. So it's basically simple, it's fast. So I provided an example with 1 million lines, and it's just done in a second. But sometimes you have to use more complex models and more complex clustering, and you can use MinShift, but you can use also Gaussian mixture model. And as a statistician, I like this method because it uses you assume that your data are distributed following multiple Gaussian law, and you have to find each Gaussian law, that's the red and yellow group areas, and once it's done, each group is classified having its mean and its properties. It's probably the method I will recommend for software engineers because it's simple and you don't even have to choose the number of clusters you want. So it's really cool. But unsupervised learning is not just clustering, it's also association. So let's say I have a line that interests me in my data set. I want to find all the lines similar to the line of interest. So the K nearest neighbor use this sentence: you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if I know the 5 lines in the dataset that are similar to the line I search, I can use that to predict another value. Or in a recommendation system, I can use it to say, okay, this guy has done this. Maybe it's interesting for you. So it's both unsupervised and it can be used as classification. And for hierarchical clustering, it's a bit like that. You compute the distance between all your points, and it gives a matrix like that. And then you sort the points. So the points that are near, that have a low distance between them, are near in the matrix. So you can decide to make two cluster of points, of course, but with this method, you could say, okay, I cut the tree to have 3 clusters. So it's really cool to have this possibility to choose the number, of course. But this method is quadratic, so if you have a big data set, maybe you won't scale. Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so shortly. I'm not an expert in reinforcement learning, so I'm looking forward to have a coffee from Jean-Emile or Mohamed, but I can explain the basic ideas. So reinforcement learning is based on behavioral psychology. It's like a realistic learning, in fact, because let's say you are in a game, you're an agent in a game. So the game is your environment, and you can have a set of states. And based on this state, it could be the location in the game. You can make some sort of action, and some action will be good to finish the game, right? And some other action will be just bad, and you get stuck in some place. So to learn what are the good actions to do, we use a system of reward to say, okay, your action is good. I will use weight it with a positive reward, and if the action is bad, I will use a negative reward. It's mostly the principle of reinforcement learning. After that, there's a lot of algorithm, especially to estimate the good reward to affect to some actions, and there's a lot of things to study in there, but I won't detail it because I'm not an expert in this field. And to end this presentation, I've found a nice map of machine learning on the net, and I found it cool to, even if I disagree with some classification in the map, it's the kind of thing that is useful, I think, to have in mind. I think neural networks, except for GAN, can be in supervised learning as well as ensemble learning. I don't know what you think about that. But we have these 3 type of algorithm: supervised when you have the variable in your data set, and supervised when you want to build the variable you predict, and reinforcement when you want to use a reward system. So I think it's a good start to to see what are the methods of the machine learning. And that will end my presentation. So if you have a question, feel free to ask them.
Nice, thank you. I have one question. You have presented different type of machine learning, especially supervised or unsupervised.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a number of data you need to be able to build your machine learning model? I think you've mentioned 1 million lines at the moment, but is there a minimum number or differences between supervised machine learning and unsupervised? Or
To the best of my knowledge, there is no minimal amount of data you should have. Of course, if you have 50 lines, it will be harder to get the results. Some algorithm by design need more data. For example, neural network, if you have multiple layers, you will have to have at least 1,000 lines, or you will loop at it and you will overfit on your data. It means that you will just get the specificity of the training part of the dataset. It's one constraint you have, but between supervised and unsupervised learning, there's not so much difference in terms of minimum amount of data.
okay, thank you.
And Luc, I have maybe one question regarding supervised and more specifically deep learning. I'm not sure to well understand why it's so difficult to make it explainable.
Okay, you mean with neural networks?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take the relative slide. Okay. So if you have just 3 layers, you can say this input there, I can see the influence it has on this layer and this layer. So it's quite easy if it's not deep learning. But if you have a lot of layer, each layer will add some interaction, in fact. And at the end, when what we call interpretable learning, it's compute the influence of X1 on the 20th layer. And we are not able to do that with deep neural networks. And I will add that with TensorFlow, for example, you cannot have a subtle control on the weight of your neural network. It means that you can say,
okay.
I will update the weight, add 0.1 to the weight and see what happens. And it's something that is important to do with other algorithms. I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, it's clear. It's what I missed initially. It's not you that defines the number of layers, but the algorithm will do it automatically, which means that you miss.
Yes, you define the architecture of the neural network, but if your architecture is so so complicated, you cannot retrieve the influence of the initial input on some layer. So at the end, you cannot say, okay, why do I do this prediction based on this input? And that's a definition of interpretable.
Okay. And maybe another question. During your presentation, at some point, you said, okay, this one seems to me the best for software engineering, or this one, huh? Is it just feeling, or is there some rationale behind this?
No, it's just feeling, but because I think for us, it's just in terms of compromise between the data sets you could have and the amount of work you have to provide to get results. I mean, in general, I think maybe I'm wrong, but a software engineer have benchmark, and if he uses some machine learning stuff, it just additional works, and it's not the content of his paper, right?
Yeah.
And if you, I think neural networks or random boosting trees are a lot of work to parameter, but of course you can do it. It's not. It's just a feeling. It's not rational.
And beyond this feeling, do you think that we can eventually get a kind of reading grid where, according to the kind of data set, according to I don't know what, we can help people to choose the proper one? Or maybe it's already existing? I don't know.
Yes, but in general, even in variability, we have to test a lot of algorithm. So I don't know if some consensus exists about if you have some type of data set, you must use this algorithm. I'm not able to say that. But I don't know. I can search, but I think it's not the spirit. I don't know. We have other researcher in variability, so I will ask Mathieu and Hugo. Maybe they have ideas about that.
Yeah, I'm just asking because, you know, our DNA as software engineer is really to automate.
Yeah.
And until now, it seems to be, yeah, I will make a try. I have some feeling, I'm an expert, and everything is in my mind. And at the end, I will do something. I was just wondering if we can translate everything into an algorithm.
I see the point. You want to extract some rules and say, okay, I will put the rules on a software that will do it for me or something like that.
Exactly. And then according to the description of a data set, of a specific scenario, I don't know what, then we can automatically generate, I don't know, the notebooks that directly import the right library and doing the right initialization of this one and so on. So maybe we can automate some stuff and to drive the developer in the choice of the good libraries and so on.
I think there are nice things to do, but it will be complicated to get these rules and to be sure of it. I think they are not so evident to find, but that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
Me, Quentin.
What?
Do you hear me?
Yep.
It's a question about the random forest. I don't know boosting tree, but if you wanted to classify something more in than not just a table of data like a normal table, but something like a relational database, trying to use like random forest on relational database. I know there is a relation between them, but is there algorithm that are more adapted to classify graphs than tables?
Okay, that's a good question. In fact, that more of a database problem than machine learning problem, I think, because in fact it's ugly, but you could make all the joint table, do a big table with all the information, and then you have your big data set, right? But on graph, it's something. Moreover, I know your problem, so I will so I know what you have to deal with. On graph, it's something not easy to do, and I think at some point you have to transform your graph to a data table, and you may have to drop some links to get. That's really a nice subject.
Yeah.
But I don't have the answer. Sorry.
Okay. Was trying. Thank you.
Okay. So I have students waiting for me. So you're done.
Thank you a lot, Luc.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luc. And as soon as I have a link, I will share it to you.
Okay. Okay. I'll send you the link. I will hope not to forget it. Okay, see you.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.